So let's go through, because we've got kind of a list here. This first one I'm really fascinated with, and I'm going to try to push back as much as I can for the sake of the listeners, right? To give them, because, for those that listen and go, I don't know about that, I'm going to try to articulate for them as well.
Cool.
So the first is from that the church will endure forever because all of God's elect will be saved. Tell me what's going on there.
Yeah. So I think we have kind of a nervousness about the church in the United States in the year of our Lord 2024. And, if you look at the demographics, like the nervousness is in a certain respect well-founded, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at our society and the numbers of Christians are just going down. The numbers of Lutherans on the whole are going down. The numbers in the Missouri Synod are going down. This has been the case for decades. It's not a surprise to anybody, right? And so it can be really easy for us to kind of get doom and gloom about it. And especially, I think, like within our local congregations, right? Because how many people in the Missouri Synod are living right now in a congregation that used to have 200 people on a Sunday, and now they have like 50, and they're looking around and they're like, well, we're not sure if we're really going to be able to pay a full-time pastor. We're not really sure if we're going to be able to like keep up with the maintenance on the building. This church might have to close and fold into some other congregation or something like that, especially if the next congregation isn't particularly close. I mean, you get worried about the church, right? And I think that's a common situation for people. And so I think we've fallen into this mentality a lot of times that it's up to us to save the church, right? The reason why the church is declining is because of our personal failures. And the only way that it's going to continue is going to be if we go out there and really work hard and really hit the pavement and, do whatever kind of evangelism strategy you think is necessary to get people back in the church so that the church can continue, right? So that the church will not die with me or with our generation. In contrast to kind of that worry and that fear, when you read through the Lutheran confessional writings, I think the best place to start with that is the 7th article of the Augsburg Confession, where it says right there in the first line, I think it's in the Latin text where it says this, that the church will endure forever, right? And that's important, and it's just as plainly scripturally grounded as can be, right? They're not making stuff up. You just look to the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it,
Mm-hmm.
right? The church is going to endure forever. And so we can take a second to kind of like take a breather and say, okay, no matter how badly we may or may not screw things up, our Lord Jesus is going to keep his church, right? He is going to keep that faithful remnant who has not bowed their knees to Baal. And maybe it's not going to look like precisely the church that you remember in the days in which your particular congregation was doing really well, or when America had a whole bunch of people in surveys saying that they were Christians or whatever the case may be. But the church will endure. It's not going to go away, right? So I think that's the first thing that we really need to keep in mind in this age of nervousness is our Lord Jesus has promised that there's always going to be a Christian church. May not look exactly the way that you remember it looking, may not be in the place where you think it was,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, St. Augustine, one of my favorite authors in the history of Christianity was the Bishop of Hippo in North Africa. And if you go to Hippo today, you're not going to find Christian churches, right? The thing was overrun by Muslims, not too long after Augustine lived, actually, right? And yet the church has endured, right? It's like 1 billion Christians running around these days.
Mm-hmm.
So the church is going to endure. We're not going to screw it up, right? Like we can screw it up. We can make decisions that are bad and not faithful, but we're not going to get rid of the church no matter how bad and unfaithful we are. The Lord is going to keep this thing going in spite of us, as he always has.